In this lesson, we're going to talk about what are the safety issues that are faced by a nonprofit organization, whether it be a charity or business league, trade association, and what does the board do to assure that the organization is safe? This is a very big issue as a lot of litigation, including litigation where individual directors are sometimes named as parties, come down to the safety issue. It's also a complex area, and that this gets us deep into the issue of the board's relationship with its chief executive officer, other officers, and major responsible staff. You don't want to have the board breathing down the neck of those who can be trusted to carry out functions. After all, those working day to day are going to have much more information and insight into decision making than those that only meet for a few hours every quarter or so. So you want to make sure that the staff that you have in place is competent and carry out its role, and you don't want to be constantly second guessing them to give advice on how, well, if I was doing this, I would have done it this way. That can be very demoralizing for staff. However, it is undeniably the reality that when people operate without direct supervision, they tend to be susceptible to making errors, overlooking issues, getting wrong priorities, and sometimes engaged in theft, mismanagement, and improper direction of resources. Everybody is more forthright, effective, and competent if somebody is supervising them. Of course, if you only have one supervisor, you never reach the end of the line. Who is the top person? Well, this is why boards exist. The advantage that a group of people as a board has over an individual is they have more insight from wisdom coming across many voices, and they tend to be honest because a dishonest director in a board meeting will be caught and admonished in that case or kicked off the board. This is why the top, most powerful person in the organization needs to be accountable to a group, and that would be the board. So in carrying the function out, we'll get into this in more detail in the next lesson on the audit function, but you want this tension resolved between trusting your top management and making sure they're carrying out what they do. So part of the responsibility of the board is to make sure that the organization is safe. We'll talk about safety in four key areas: personnel, property, compliance with the law, and financial issues. And for each of these, the board should defer to trusted staff, if they have merited trust, to do the primary work in operating day to day in compliance with these standards. However, the board needs to get enough data to make sure that they know that these things are being carried out effectively. And the board should be educated in these topics to enough of an extent that they actually know what the expectations are. Our recommendation is that for these four key areas: personnel, property, compliance with the law, and finances, that you have reports from experts in the fields who are not a part of the organization itself actually report to the board. You can have your insurance broker show up at a meeting for a half an hour. Recommend every 3 or 4 years that this be done, just to provide an update on the strategy that is being followed, how that compares with the industry standards, and educate the board on how to carry these thoughts out. We talk a lot about 3-year cycles in these meetings, and part of that is because it's most typical for directors to have a 3-year term, and you can see a lot of turnover in a board over 3 years. So if you have a report every 3 years by outside experts, that helps assure that you've always got people on the board who have an understanding of what these key areas are. So we're going to talk a little bit about these four issues and the kind of expertise advice that you need along the way. First of all, in personnel safety, you want to make sure that all of the personnel are working in an environment where they are safe from any kinds of risks that come their way that should be controlled. Increasingly in our society, there's a great deal of concern about harassment in the workplace, and also where youth are involved, youth or children, having a protection of children from abuse because there is a long history of problems arising where organizations are often naive in what kind of protection is needed from those that seek to do harm to others. In additionally, if the organization owns or controls the facilities, there's concern about actual physical safety. Are you complying with fire safety issues to keep the personnel safe all the times that they are there? For these, it is good to get reports from the board, from the executives in the organization, the key officers and employees on what is taking place, and also make sure that they are consulting with outside experts, such as human resources advisors. And this is an area where outside legal counsel can be beneficial as well, because that is the kind of expert that will have insight into how the law is changing to make sure that minimum standards are met. In the area of property, this is both real property and other physical property, particularly heavy equipment, automobiles, making sure that those remain safe so that no disasters are coming. If the organization leases space in an office building, this is less of a concern than when they own a building, where they've got to make sure that that building is maintained according to expected standards in the industry and also that there's sufficient material there. For these uh, facilities compliance issues, those the construction trade, maintenance entities can provide that kind of concern. I'd also throw into this area security generally, security for people, security for facilities. For this, there are experts working that area that should be consulted regularly with changes in management methods and protocol. And it is good to have them come to the board again every 3 years and describe what the key issues are faced in the industry or in the region that should be addressed. And the board can take that to determine whether they need to tell their officers and key employees, we need to improve activity here, or whether things are really satisfactory. So that's personnel and property. Third would be compliance with the law generally. Two areas that stand out in our work as a law firm are following employment law and government regulation of the charitable sector in particular. In employment law, there are many, many organizations. I would say at least 10% of our clients that come in the door are out of compliance with general employment law. People follow their expectations of what they'd like to do in meeting wage and hour payroll classification of employees, and they follow patterns that they've always followed, often without looking at the law. HR consultants can be tremendously helpful there. In terms of government registration, in particular charitable solicitation registration, the percentage of charity clients that are out of compliance in our observation, charitable organizations, is extremely high. Organizations are simply not aware of what the requirements are for those states that regulate solicitation in those states. And if you have a website that has a donate now button, many states would consider you to be soliciting in their state and require compliance. For these, you absolutely need to have the organization check to make sure they're in compliance with the law. This generally requires legal consulting, but you also need a report back to the board to make sure that this is actually being done effectively and appropriately. The fourth category for safety is financial. We've already covered this a little bit in the last lesson, but one factor we did not discuss there that's relevant here is insurance. Does the organization have appropriate levels of insurance and appropriate coverage for its industry? For this, there's probably no better authority than a insurance broker. It makes sense to rely upon the broker that sells insurance to your organization. Although even there, you've got to be aware of the potential conflict, as the broker is going to have a temptation to upsell. Happily, that's a kind of area that only advances the organization's safety protection, but it can lead to excess cost. A lot of organizations really do not understand the nature of insurance. You want to entrust your employees to monitor this, but word should come back to the board so that the board has the last word on whether the levels of coverage are sufficient. And it does this by getting basic training or insight by articles, reports issued by the key authorities relied on by the staff, so the board is informed about this. And for this, I always bring to mind a very important uh, court decision in this area, the Marchand case that involved an organization that sold one product that was ice cream. They manufactured it, and it was unsafe and caused injury. And the court came down on the board for thinking if an organization does nothing but manufacture food, the board can't be ignorant about safety in this area. They need to know and monitor. And the board was found to be deficient in that. So, in the safety issues, generally, just recapping this again, you want to have staff that you trust. The way you do that is to monitor them whether they're performing. You want to audit the activity that they are doing. You want to have reports, and you want the board to learn and become more informed about what safety means in their industry. In doing that, the safety concern can be met, and it does require relying upon experts outside the chain of command within the organization. The best experts are outside. They need to be in regular contact with your officers and key employees, but also the board should be informed from time to time what they should look for in overseeing that aspect of work.